Yeah,
I mean, I have no flaws as a DM, so I mean, this will be it.
ah,
Just kidding.
must be nice.
Just kidding.
All I have are flaws. In fact, everything I know I've learned from doing it wrong. So,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
welcome to the Quantum Ogre Cast, where improv is all I do. Today's guest is once again Peter Lange, Tales from Elsewhere. Thanks for being here, Peter.
My genuine pleasure, my friend. I always like coming back and just shooting the breeze with you for a while, talking games.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Glad to have you here as my semi-regular co-host here on the Quantum Ogre Cast. Today is going to be an exciting episode of what we're going to call it Diagnosing Your DM Dump Stat. We're probably not going to hit everything out there under the sun that might be your DM dump stat, but we're going to go over a few key components like world building, combat, information, improv, stuff like that. And as always, it's going to be a weird soup of a conversation where we just meander into different topics. But yeah, so let's start off with something a little more lighthearted, like inspirations. I had JP Cuvert on, and we did
It's
this
awesome.
really fun thing where we talked about sort of our appendix in. We stuck to video games, though. I realized, like, post
Hmm.
editing, what comes to mind was when you did the Tales from Elsewhere Kickstarter. You had different categories for like
Yeah.
books, novels, video games. I thought that was a really cool way to get folks familiar with like what is the pitch of this game, the style, the vibes.
Yeah.
um, we could do a similar thing for you, like your specific appendix into your GM style, or like, like the what
Oh, yeah.
influences your style of play or how you like to run games.
I like that. And, shockingly, it's going to line up a lot with what I put on that Kickstarter.
Yeah,
On a lot of things. Not everything, but a lot of things. That's a really fun topic. I mean, I had some people back it and then message me and be like, "You listed Blood Meridian as an inspiration, so I want to check out your game." I'm like,
yeah,
"Oh, well, hopefully." I mean, you know, Blood Meridian's quite an acquired taste of a book. Uh, but there's a couple films. Film is big for me. I almost went into film as my area of study. Like I worked at Blockbuster Video, and so I think about movies and I watch a lot of movies, and that's the biggest source of inspiration for me when I run games, not video games, because a lot of video games I play are like competitive games,
yeah.
right? Which don't translate all that well into creating something like a story. Um, but a couple movies that really stand out to me that influence my style is The Thing,
Mm,
because I like to run horror or suspense, and that is a masterclass in mounting dread and lack of complete information.
mm.
And that influences me a lot. I love when the players like pull back a tarp or like they reveal something and they all look at each other like, "Oh no." Right? Like cuz they now know what it means.
Or they don't.
They're or they don't, right? One of the classic moves that I've done like in an adventure is the players go into a dungeon and they find like the corpse of an NPC they know is back in town.
Mm,
Right, the classic like doppelganger sort of reveal. Like that's quintessential like the thing type of storytelling.
yeah.
So that's a huge one. I'm really influenced actually by the 13th Warrior
Hmm.
movie with Antonio Banderas. I know this was a commercial and critical failure. I love this movie.
Yeah.
It is a D&D adventure.
Yeah.
It's a classic D&D adventure. A group of heroes arrive at a besieged little kingdom on the frontier and have to protect it from strange threats in the woods, right? I love that kind of thing. So those two are big in my mind, as far as what I do game design wise. And the film kind of lead into them like Alien or Aliens, right? All so that's in the same category as the thing, right? There's a particular type of beat that they do that I just love it. So those are huge influences for me.
Yeah,
How about
absolutely.
yeah? How about
Y-
you?
Yeah, I was actually trying to think of some while you were telling yours, because it's
I could
funny.
vamp for longer.
Well, no, you picked some really solid choices there, because like I do think that movies especially are so, cousins of tabletop role-playing games, from everything from like setting the scenes to the narrative beats and having to, tie everything in a nice knot in maybe a couple of hours if you're doing like a one shot or something. But yeah, it's all over the map for me. Like everything from like the Goonies to like any Hayao Miyazaki film, to stuff like I love the show Dark. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
Oh yeah,
that's one of my all-time favorite shows. I love stuff like Lost, even though Lost gets a bad rap for the ending. I think the mystery and the intrigue that it builds throughout the series is really fascinating, and also like the character work that happens, with the flashbacks.
Oh yeah, when it was good, it was great.
But I'm also like, it's funny. I cite that, but like really, that's not my GM style totally either. Like I like to have the big twist moments and stuff like that, but I don't do a lot of the like super in-depth like what was your dad like kind of moments whatever you're just dungeon crawling and things like that.
Yeah I get you,
man. I feel like now that we're getting into this subject, I feel like you and I and maybe like Frank from What Is Tabletop could have like a whole episode where we just talk movies and TV and stuff. Yeah. So leave a comment if that sounds like something you want to hear.
Well, speaking of dungeons, I did a video last year for like one of the dungeon jams or something like that, where I talked about how the movie Alien is a dungeon, right? And how these horror movies are often set up like a dungeon. They just the characters don't know it.
Yeah.
Right. So Alien, the movie Alien Romulus.
Yeah, actually,
is quintessential dungeon.
I did a 5-room dungeon for the Dungeon Jam video.
Right, that's right. You did that one in Dungeon Jam, and I did one about like horror in sessions. But yeah, your Dungeon Jam with Alien Romulus was perfect because it's exactly it. Like they show up to scavenge they're pillaging a dungeon for loot, literally for loot, and it goes terribly wrong. So horror and action horror and sci-fi horror, those are like really big dungeon influences for me because they have those kind of moments where like what's on the other side of this door, right? In the dungeon you want people to kind of be afraid of what will come, like there's tension there, and especially when you just describe a weird sound on the other side of the door. Like I listen at the door, right, and you hear like squelching. It's like, what even is that? It's great, right?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far on our like starter convo, but yeah, actually, it's funny you should say that exactly because like I've been watching a couple shows lately, and all I can think about is like this is a dungeon, or at least like an adventure book, that kind of thing, because like I just watched Fallout Season 2.
I haven't watched the second season yet.
So yeah, no spoilers, but the whole time I'm just like, yeah, this is a fetch quest,
That's great. Yeah, I do need to watch that. I thoroughly enjoyed the first season. Yeah, a lot of and there's a lot of video game influences in those ways as well, because there is a lot of cross contamination with that. Yeah,
absolutely.
Goonies is a great one though. Like that's an adventure, classic adventure.
Yeah, in fact, I'm pretty sure there's a Pirate Borg adventure that is just the Goonies. So
excellent.
I may have played in it, but yeah. All right. Well, that'll at least get us kicked off with some of your a brief peek into your appendix, and maybe we'll talk about some more next time you're on, like some books, comic books, stuff like that. But we've got a fun episode ahead of us. I think we're going to try to do Diagnose Your DM Dump Stat, which is going to be things like world building, more or less of it, story beats, pacing, combat, info, and improv. So stay tuned after a word from our sponsors. Hey, do you want to try more TTRPGs? What if I told you could try them for free? Check out Crit, Community-Run Infinite Tabletop, a completely free online gaming convention with some awesome game masters, including myself, and these folks who I interviewed on a previous episode of my podcast. Mark your calendars for June 20th through the 28th. Check out the link in the description below and remember to game at Crit. We'll see you there. Yeah, actually, you said something a minute ago that I think segues nicely into one of these topics. You were kind of talking about like information, right? Information presentation through
Yeah.
either like the way a movie is set up or the way an adventure is set up, way games are set up, things like that. This is really maybe this one is geared more towards like newbie DMs or GMs rather than your hardcore seasoned game masters who just have learned to do this through some road or another. But I often think about how important the information that you give the players is, and whether that's like set pieces such as like a dungeon map, or earlier before the cameras were rolling, we were talking a little bit about index card RPG and how there's a really good method of like putting down images of things that you might interact with within a given scene. And so like the flow of information from the GM to the players, giving them opportunities for choice, is such an important skill that I think some people aren't as aware of maybe a deficit that they might have because they either over explain things and then people get lost in the sauce, or they just don't give quite enough information and everyone's just kind of waiting for that next breadcrumb to be laid down for them so that then they can take the reins and make choices.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest skills is properly rendering scenes. And I've seen veteran DMs, played for decades, still struggle, I think, to properly render scenes. Like you said, it's where you describe the interactable objects in a room, basically. Um, you know, where there might be danger, where there could be clues, right? I want to reach out into the world, right? But I need to know, like, it's not just a gray sludge that I pass my hand into, right? I get really frustrated when I don't have sensory information for what I'm seeing because then I don't know what thread to pull on. And so that's when you just do I search the room then.
Yeah.
Roll search, right? Like that's because I don't want to have to ask for information about what the room looks like. So like fine, I'll just pick up the dice. Right? Like is the bookshelf sturdy or old? Is it full of books or is it empty? Like there's a bookshelf in the corner. I need more than that, right? Like to start making decisions. I don't want to have to walk up to each item and like have it render from a blurry image, like in older games that had really shallow render distances would do this. Video games, right? Like
Yeah.
I need it to render for me, and that's something that took a long time for me to get good at. I think I'm pretty good at it now, but that's not easy, not easy at all.
No, and that sort of, I like how you phrased it, that exchange, well, the exchange of information currency, whatever you want to call it, is so important because it does make a difference in the player's ability to feel like they're embedded in a scene, or what's the magic word I'm looking for? Immersed. Immersed.
Yeah.
There it is. Immersed in a scene, because it really can feel like you're just in a big, Matrix style room, and shelves of guns or whatever are popping up, and you're like, okay, well, if I'd known that was there, I definitely would have interacted with it, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you can also go sort of in the wrong direction too, by like suddenly, here's something that happens with me. I start to explain or describe something that I just come up with because I think it's cool in the moment, and then my players like really focus in on that.
Oh yeah, they play with it like, well, it's gotta tell us your secrets, whatever that thing was.
Yeah.
It's gotta be significant. Jordan described it for 5 minutes.
Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, like I put that in there because it made sense with the room you're in or whatever, the dungeon, the vibes that were happening, and now they're just running off with that thing, and you're like, well, that wasn't really supposed to have that much emphasis, but now here we are.
Yeah.
So
Oopsie doodle. Yeah. The other section of that has been really top of mind for me lately is monster rendering. This is also super important. Now, in a lot of games, you don't have a lot of counterplay or interaction points with a monster. You smack it till it's dead.
Yeah.
Totally fine. But I had to write in my GM guidance section for my book, like, you can't do that in my game. You need to render their hostile parts, like how they hurt somebody, so that the players know how to threat assess it, because they do interact with the biology of a threat. So you can't just say like there's a big undead monster in the corner. Like, well, how many limbs does it have? Is there a chainsaw attached to one of those limbs or not? Like, I need to know that now. Like,
Yeah.
let me know now, because that's the gameplay structure of it. So that part of my own DMing has improved over the last like 5 years because I've had to do that more with my own game. But not every game needs that. Like, it's immersive, yeah, to describe the black dragon in detail with like its skull like horns, but also like everybody knows what a dragon is.
Yeah.
And so are you just like pun like listening to your own voice and wanting to show off your writing, at that point, that's where you start taking it too far.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
especially with like a horror game, if thinking about Tales from Elsewhere for a second, like
Yeah.
how much more important is it to describe the juicy bits whenever it's horror
Yeah.
versus like, it's just
Yeah.
yet another field of goblins running at you.
Yeah, you don't need to describe the goblin slice in great detail, right? You took 3 damage. Let's move on to the better things. But when like the blood oiler has picked you up and the saw blade removes a leg, we want to focus on that moment. We want to live there a sec, right? And so you describe that more, and that's a significant moment in the gameplay. But yeah, every goblin arrow doesn't need to have like, and it pierces your flesh and you feel it separating your ribs or something, right? Like, you
Right.
took 4 damage. Let's move on with our lives.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, like when you're setting up a scene, right? That's when it's the most important for those sort of descriptions.
Yeah.
And there's probably a magic number somewhere out there, like your three to five bullet point kind of things, where like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
enter a room, you get like 3 to 5 things that you might want to interact with. Because I feel like any more than that, it's gonna like start going in one ear and out the other.
Yeah.
Any less than that, and that's kind of what we were talking about, of feeling like the room isn't rendered, that sort of thing. But you bring up a really good point, especially with like monsters and stuff. And again, this is going to be, your mileage may vary depending on the genre you're running, the style of game, what gets emphasized. Because like
Hmm.
something that comes to mind, I had Yohai on, who wrote Cairn, and
Baron, yeah.
he had a really interesting way of like envisioning how players interact with monsters, and it was descriptive first. Like, he would never just say like, oh, there's a goblin coming at you, or I shouldn't put words in his mouth. I won't say never, but
Yeah. Yeah.
he was saying for Karen, like, you open the book, maybe you roll a couple of tables, you sort of make this hodgepodge monster, like I think his monster that he rolled up was kind of like a basilisk, but it had like chicken feet and stuff, and it ended up
Awesome.
having this like really interesting kind of interaction, because even me sitting there, I'm thinking like, if I was a player in this game, how would I approach this fight? I might be holding back, waiting to see what this thing can do before I really
Yeah,
just.
because you've never encountered it before.
Yeah, exactly. So it brought up an interesting idea with that like information sort of highway between the
Yeah.
players and the game master. Like, do you withhold some stuff, or do you just throw it all out there? Because like there, he's not saying it's a basilisk, but maybe there's some
Yeah.
stone figures around the room that have been petrified or something like that. So
Yeah, you want to give players enough information so that they can make choices, but you don't want to remove the mystery.
yeah,
Over explaining can remove mystery, and you don't, especially if you're taking a really tried and true stat block, like you're grabbing a chimera or whatever. Change the description, people, right? Like, mess with it. It's the easiest way to keep your players off guard. If you start saying, what is it, like goat head, snake tail, lion head, or whatever, they're like, it's chimera. I know what this is.
yeah,
But if you start saying, one end of its head is like a change the biology. Like, it has a scorpion tail, not a snake head. Still does poison damage, right? But you can start making them be like, what is this? Which is great. Even though you've given them information, okay, poison, stinger, bad, like, that's information. They don't necessarily know that it's the chimera stat block. And this is really important if you're running games for veterans of D&D,
Oh yeah.
because I joke about this all the time. I'm the new guy at my table, and I've been playing since the year 2000, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as a monster starts being described, if it's something straight out of the book, everybody at the table knows what it is,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah,
gotta mix it up.
there's your pitch for changing things up and playing different games right there. Because sometimes it is just fun to be like, like I had a friend who wanted to run Starfinder, and I started to look at the book, and I was like, okay, what are these like shark goblin things in space? Like that just sounds cool.
Heck yeah.
I don't know what any of this is, and that excites me. It's why like, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but like, it's why I get really stoked when I see games like Land of Eam or what was the big Dolmenwood,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know anything about it. It's not going to be
Yes.
good old D&D. It's not going to be beholders and
Yeah.
gelatinous cubes and all that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
fresh
And
and
that's
exciting. So
my one big criticism, I would say, of a lot of OSR books that get created is that don't give me another goblin, y'all, or an ooze. Like, come on,
how
let's
about
mix it
an
up a
ooze
little bit.
goblin?
Yeah, yeah, do something. Like, so many of those stat blocks are just. I've got them in my third edition monster manual from 26 years ago, right?
Yeah,
And give me something weird. Like I need more weird. When I go through a dungeon, I want weird stuff, right? And sadly now things like a beholder aren't that weird to people who play OSR, like who play a lot of D&D, who play a lot of OSR. Beholder isn't weird. Make something weird, right?
yeah.
That's what I want. But that's what you can do with that description. You can make it weird yourself without really messing with the stat block too much.
Yeah, or maybe you take this beholder and instead of like eyeballs on stalks around it, it has hands like severed
Yeah,
hands floating all
yeah,
around its big eye. You know,
yeah. And it doesn't shoot beams from it. It like reaches out and touches you with them. Like
yeah.
it like stretches and touches you. Like how gross is that? I'm sold. Sold immediately on your beholder joke. By the way, make that stat block. The touchy beholder.
And
Super gross.
instead of a eyeball, it's just a bunch more fingers, just to get
Yeah,
real
yeah, it's just more
creepy.
hands.
There you go.
Somebody
There's your next
There we
Tales
go.
from Elsewhere monster.
Yeah. Somebody joked with me that like I like eyes and hands. Those are like the things that all my
I
like
mean,
weird hands, weird eyes. That's like my thing, and I stand accused, and it's not inaccurate.
it makes sense. You wrote a action horror game, and what's creepier than like hands and eyes being messed with? So
Yeah, asymmetry. That's like, by the way, a hack for monster design. Asymmetry. It'll immediately make them disturbing to people because we symmetry is how we like judge beauty, basically. So anyway,
well, so all right, should we keep going on? We could probably make a
yeah,
whole episode out of just the info choice, word count, setting scenes, stuff like that. But we could stay in this for a bit or move on to one of the other sort of
there's
DM
one
dump
that
stats.
yeah. So one of my DM dump stats that I don't want to talk about this one because it's people could consider it a good thing, but it's more often works against you. It's over world building.
Mm,
So I spend way too much time on the world building stuff that people will never interact with. I like it because I like long histories and lineages and details and economic structures and religious structures that all led to the state of the world that the players go into a dungeon in, right?
yeah,
And they will interact with not a lot of that. I am very inefficient with my prep in that way. Um, I enjoy it, but at the same time, I'm spending hours and hours like creating the bloodline lineage of this one royal family and all the different royal families that they've married into. And
I'm laughing because I've been
I
there.
yeah, right. And it's fun. It's super fun.
Yeah,
And I did that, and it just doesn't come up, right? It just doesn't come up.
yeah,
And I know it's good prep, but in this day and age, with how little time there is and there's so many games to play, I feel like it's holding me back from running more campaigns because the amount of prep pressure I'm putting on myself to make like a detailed history of a world, because I like homebrewing worlds. It's like it's also more rigid in that way and less open to improvisation, right? Like I'm just digging myself a hole,
Yeah.
a hole of lore that of my own making. Yeah.
You know, I've fallen victim to the same world builder's disease. Some of this I've like pulled from like lessons from writing because I tried to write a book at one point. But I challenged myself when I started a new campaign. I wanted to do this dungeon crawl, island crawl kind of thing where the world was shattered and there's like 1,000 islands. And so
Hell yeah.
when I sat down to start the campaign, I thought like, all right, I want to do this with like 10 bullet points max. Like that is the whole world of these 10 bullet points. And I really tried to like say what is the least amount I can do and still make it an evocative world and let the players loose in it. And
Yeah.
I was surprised to find that, they were pretty satisfied with a very little amount of information. Almost none. And really,
Right.
I may have said this on like a live stream somewhere, but one of the inspirations, I was thinking about some of my favorite games like Dark Souls or Elden Ring, where they
Oh yeah.
typically they start you off with maybe like a kind of vague cutscene, and then they throw you in a dungeon with a broken sword and they say go. you know and you've got to claw
Yep.
your way out of it. You have no idea what's going on. You learn as you go. You find little breadcrumbs here and there, and that was what I tried to do. So this is a long way of saying, like, challenge yourself to see how much can you get away with. Like what's the minimum amount of prep you can do to start playing a game, without
Yep.
feeling like you need to do all the lineage kind of stuff, because I've been there. I've totally done it too, but
Yeah.
you know
There's a meme that you're reminding me of from a long time ago, and I found it really fast. It says Dark Souls revolutionized games in the sense that instead of a story, now you can just have some guy with a big sword named Myrmidon of Loss who gasps Zanzibar forgive me when he dies, and then 20 YouTubers will make an hour-long video about how deep your lore is.
100%. Yep.
So accurate. It's so good. But
uh,
at the same time, like I said, that's actually there's a lesson there that's also good, right? Titillate people with your lore rather than dump it on them.
yeah.
Something I'm trying to get better at, and we were talking a little bit off stream, and I can't speak specifics about what I'm working on, but the project I'm working on right now is supposed to be much more open-ended in its story structure, where letting go of the reins and having the players contribute much more to
Yeah.
how the narrative world is built is outside of my comfort zone. It's just not what I've normally done. I'm very particular usually. And so I'm trying to work on this dump stat that I have about world building control and over prep and try to experiment with something a little bit more improvisational, a little bit more collaborative, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
because I want to stretch my legs a little bit, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been kind of exploring a similar area with Seven Delving Sins, because
Yeah.
it is super open. It's very, like, I put collaborative in one of the descriptive words, I believe, at some point. Maybe it's not there right now, but because I liked this idea of like handing the reins to the players, especially if it's a game where like you're doing low or minimum prep. You want to be able to
Hmm.
say like, okay, well, where does your character come from, or like who is this in the scene, or like describe this monster a little bit more detail. Give me like something weird about it. I think that is one good tool to have in your belt if you are the kind of person who over world builds and you want to
Yeah.
pull back a little bit, is to just hand the reins over. It's actually very freeing too, because like it lets you take a break and like embed yourself in the scene as the game master
Hmm.
and say like, okay, well now I have to like play off of what they just said. And that this also goes kind of into like improv,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We could slide right into the subject of improv right here, because that's another skill that I think might be a DM dump stat, right? But yeah, I think there are lots of ways to combat the urge to over world build. And one thing I'll leave with this quote, but I think it was Sly Flourish that said, if it doesn't happen at your table, then you might as well not have written it down.
How dare he say something so accurate and so directly into like my heart? How
Yeah.
dare he? Yeah, that's really apt though. That's really apt. Yeah, that's great. Well, here's a question for you. What is your DM max stat, would you say?
Oh, my DM max stat.
Yeah. We've
Um,
been self-deprecating this whole time, but like what would you say you're really good at?
Apparently it's like silly little NPCs because
That's such a fun skill.
I just a lot of times I will like come up with a character in 10 seconds, and like right now I'll just give an example. We had a goblin in like a random goblin that they caught, by himself away from the rest of the camp, and I had to come up
Classic.
with a character on the spot. So actually, if this is going to point back to a live stream that I did, but I just picked two of the Magic the Gathering colors, and I was like, okay, he's red, white. He's a little bit of chaos, but he's militant and he's about his
Yep.
community. And then
Boros Guild. Yep.
and then I gave him a Boston accent, and that was it. And everyone fell in love with
And
him.
I say they fell in love, didn't they?
Yeah,
It's always like a goblinoid too. 100 years ago when I'm running like 3.5 D&D or something, I needed to come up with an NPC on the spot, and I think I've mentioned him in a video before. I'm like, oh man, I just need to like make somebody now. I needed a friendly NPC to guide them, and
yeah,
so I made a hobgoblin named Bardlag. It just came to mind, and I didn't know what accent, so I did Yakov Smirnov impression, and so it was just a ridiculous character, just a ridiculous character, and the NPC became the central character of the plot going forward because he was
yeah.
immediately adopted by the players, right? I should have known doing a bad Russian accent like that would immediately endear them. That's a really fun skill though, because that's part of improvisation, right? Being able to spontaneously make fun characters that the players want to poke, like they want to interact with that character, whether good or bad or funny, right? That's a good skill.
Well, to throw the question back at you, what about you? Do you have a stat that's maxed out in your
Probably
GM?
combat. I think
Yeah,
combat. Like I'm a combat guy. Like I run real good combats, whether it's D&D or whatever. That's like my specialty. Violence. Violence is my specialty. I would say that and gruesome details in the info section. Like I just slather it on. Like I can improvise that really easily because I just ingest a lot of horror content, which is often full of visceral details. But yeah, I'm like a combat guy. I know like a lot of games these days are like, we want to make combat fast or we want combat should be over quickly. I'm like, I want to live in combat for a while sometimes. I just want it to be fun.
well,
Like.
I think this is actually a really good natural segue because let's talk about this for a minute because I get to play in a couple of your games, so I know from experience
Yeah.
that this is a good skill of yours because you. But here's the thing: I think a lot of people don't realize that does make it their dump stat. I think a lot of people do the you're standing in a long hallway, everybody gets
Yeah.
bottlenecked
Gray
at the
box.
door.
Yeah.
You just are fighting to kill the other
Yeah.
NPCs, goblins, whatever, and there are no stakes. There's no
Yeah.
there's nothing to play with. Like,
Why are we killing each other?
yeah, other
Right.
than just to beat a bag of hit points. But like my mind immediately goes to the river,
Yeah.
the river
Yeah.
encounter. Like that is a huge combat. Like there's a lot of moving pieces. But
Yeah. It's like the whole session.
I never felt
Yeah.
bored. I never felt like I wasn't role playing. I never felt like, you know, there weren't things at stake. I never got so pulled out. In fact, like I would, just to attest to your skill here, there
Yeah.
was a point where we had to make a choice. Frank's character,
Yeah.
she got hit by. I actually think my character threw like an
Holy
incense that
water.
like pushed
Oh yeah,
away.
the banishing incense. Yeah.
Yeah, that pushed away like undead or outside forces and stuff like that. And his
Yeah.
character at the moment was like an aberration, and so
Yeah, yeah, he was playing Yun and she was in monstrous transformation. So he was a horror, right? She was in horror mode. Yeah.
but I think a lot of people, they can start to GM and not realize that their combats are boring. That
Oh,
there's nothing
yeah.
at stake, that there are no moving pieces. It's just like you said, a gray square with doors.
Yeah, like the big litmus test is after you've completed a round, if that round was the same as the previous round, that's a failed combat, in my opinion. Like, why are you still doing it? Like, we've traded blows again, nobody's died, and we do it again. Right? That's boring.
Yeah.
You got to have something. Something blows up over here, or well, with the river crossing specifically, that one is a really simple sequence of events, right? That's a constant escalation. You're crossing the river, the wagon tips, NPC is drowning. Got to save him. One turn later, bandits pop up to attack you, and they blow the dam upriver. Now you fight the bandits. Like 2 turns later, blood oilers wash down the river because they blew the dam and they didn't realize they were hidden underneath there. Like, it's a really simple sequence of events because you shouldn't repeat, right? Like, I really dislike gray box. I call it gray box fights. You open a door, it's a cube, and you enter that room, there's some zombies, and we fight till the zombies are dead, right?
Yeah.
And there's no additional, like, in that scene. Here's like the hack for dungeons, by the way. Fighting is loud. Fighting is loud. If they're blasting and shooting and using spells to like blow up those zombies, boy, I another monster probably heard that. Have it come on round 2, it pops around the corner and the players see it coming, right? Don't like just hit them out of nowhere,
Yeah.
right? They see something coming or they hear it coming. Immediately, your fight is like 10 times better. Just some other mon doesn't even have to be a hard monster. But if your backline is just continually sitting there unharmed because fights are always linear, you want to restructure them big time. I joke. I go multiple sessions without taking a single point of damage in my level 14 D&D group right
Oh,
now
wow.
as a wizard. Right, like just I have to get hit by a dragon's breath or something that just fills the room. That hits me. But other than that, kind of linear the fights.
And I thought of something while you were describing this, because this is, at times, this can be one of my dump stats, because I think oftentimes I need something like a map.
Right.
I know we all love our theater of the mind stuff, or even like, the index card
Yeah.
method where you have like, here's a train cart over here, here's a door over there, there's a ledge here. You throw out
Yeah.
your cards.
Classic.
Because I think I too can get sort of lost in the amorphous, nebulous idea of this fight rather than having some concrete things to say like, oh, well, you know what? There's actually a door right behind our wizard. Maybe
Yeah.
some goblin pops out of there just to see what's going on and fires an arrow or something. It throws
Yeah.
an alchemist fire into the room and suddenly everything's on fire. So if you're
Yeah. A
listening,
dark hallway. Like
yeah,
a dark hallway they can't see the end of is great. Like they're in
right.
a fight and there's a dark hallway right there to the right. Perfect. Use that, right? Something comes out of there.
Yeah, and I was going to say earlier, and if you're listening and you're thinking like maybe improv is also not one of your strong suits, then find yourself like a table or build out a table that you roll on occasionally that says something like, an escalation happens. I think there's even a table in shadowdark that says something happens, and you can roll on it and there's like 100
Yeah,
results or
that's
something like
great.
that. Just having
Yeah,
something in your back pocket to say like, okay, this combat has grown stale. I need something to happen. I need something to change. We need to
100%.
raise the stakes. Or, you can start thinking as if it's, unless it's like a monster, just a straight up beast, then you can start thinking as the characters or the creatures and think like, well, what are they
Yeah.
really after in this scene? And just pause like at the top of a round and say like, okay, well, the thing they started this fight to do is no longer,
Yeah, it's like
present
not on the
anymore.
table. Yeah.
So like, let's change it up. Maybe they change their tactics. Maybe they start pulling back and firing arrows as they leave, that sort of thing. You know,
Yeah.
that's another way of injecting even improv or tables and extra
Yeah.
information into a combat.
And I think when you're prepping a fight, one of the best things to do is actually note 1 to 2 bullet points of escalation ideas. Doesn't
Oh
even have to
yeah,
be super concrete. Like, here's a zombie fight, and like, you're planning a gray box zombie fight, and you write down more zombies question mark, right? And so like, oh, this fight is going a door, they bust through another door, and there's a dozen more zombies. Right, right. Just think about things that happen in The Walking Dead or like the roof starts to give and it collapses and a bunch
Oh
more
yeah.
zombies fall in on them or something, right? Just more zombies. Super easy. That kind of stuff, right? I like to note that before I run a session. It's like, what are my like dial it to 11 options?
Yeah.
So I don't have to improvise them. I know, and then when I feel like I need them, I just here it is. I already knew kind of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and just
Yeah, that's my
to to piggyback off of what you're saying with an example from a game that you ran, some folks might be out there and hear like, "Oh, just add more zombies," and then think like, "Oh, that's the most boring thing you could possibly do." But we played that game where we were in like an old rickety shack.
a haunted house.
It was
Yeah,
about to
yeah.
fall apart. We started fighting. Somebody shot a gun. Things got loud. And you described, and just like you were saying, you telegraphed the danger. You gave us a couple of rounds as we knew that this horde of
The horde.
zombies, a unbeatable horde, just outside the door, like coming this way. And boy, let me tell you, that definitely ratcheted up the tension in that
Yeah,
moment. Like we were just like,
right,
we gotta go. Like we're gonna die in
right.
this
It's
house.
and you telegraph that ahead of time, right? Like I said, combat is loud, even if you don't have firearms,
Yeah,
right? And that's where so frequently in games like D&D or any of its offshoots, the rogue's stealthiness is more a function of doing extra damage, like
yeah,
to trigger their sneak attack or something. But if you make attracting other monsters a serious concern, suddenly the bearded dude who shouts then throws fireballs is a liability,
yeah,
right? And the rogue's ability to dispatch enemies quietly becomes more relevant, right? Like that's cool. And you start opening up different challenges. Like in the session you played, you have to choose when do you shoot your guns
yeah,
because you're going to need to like it's designed that you could get overwhelmed, you maybe need to shoot a gun, but you wait like, okay, maybe we don't just fireball every room because the flash of light and the wizard's verbal component, you must speak like pretty loudly to do that. Maybe that's a danger, right? All just little things, just
yeah.
tiny details. Yeah, combat is loud. That's like, if you could take one thing from my recommendation for dungeon crawls, combat is loud. I've been in too many dungeons where each room is an island. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
Like,
I'm guilty of it.
and
So
yeah, it's and part of it is I happen to have the awesome the Caustic Cave of
oh
Quesmoiden
nice,
here,
yeah,
the bookmark, which is awesome, right? But what a lot of people will do is they'll treat each numbered item as if it were not connected to the others,
right,
and the distance between them is a matter of feet.
yep,
Right? So when you have a dungeon layout like this, remember that people flee, people make noise, reinforcements arrive on round three, right?
yeah. And all it takes is you stopping to say, like as you start to whisper the incantation of your spell, you hear the S's
Yeah,
echo through the
echoing.
chamber, and then they stop and
Yes.
they go, okay, well, maybe I need to be a little quieter right now that I'm
Yeah.
getting, you know,
And if they do the fireball and then you say like, okay, and your words of power echo down the hall. And then at the top of the next round, you say, you hear approaching footsteps echoing from, give them a round to prep too, right? It's a gameplay moment
yeah,
where they'll try to, okay, we need to finish up these monsters quick, or fighter go to that choke point to slow them down so we can finish killing these goblins or whatever it is, right? You need, it helps create reasons for the players to move.
yeah,
You've probably seen where you lock horns in round one and stop,
yep,
right? Battle lines established. We're getting into this isn't combat as war either, like what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like story beat combat,
oh yeah.
right?
And I was gonna say this almost really ties back in with the first point about like, information and it's all sort of builds on each other because you can take
Yeah,
that idea of info and choice and setting a scene and keep setting that scene and escalate a combat. So
yeah. Like I said, I like games where I could be in one fight the whole session, and that would be fun, right? And you can do that in almost any rule system. It's just a matter of the right story beats and the right escalations, and It doesn't matter if it's an index card RPG, something fairly light but still D20 fantasy, versus something heavy like fourth edition D&D. It was very heavy, right? All your power cards everywhere. Like any system this could work in, right? Don't have the fight stop evolving after the first turn, right? That's the big thing. Make stuff happen continually so that they pay attention, because otherwise people start checking out. If you have a game that takes a while to play, like Draw Steel, there's a lot. That's its point, right? It's big and cool. But, if it's 10 IRL minutes, 15 minutes to come back around, there's nothing for me to do during that time. And it's just going to be another damage turn for me, right? Make me think like, uh-oh, what am I going to do when, now that I hear banging on this other door, right? That's cool. It's a cool moment, regardless of your system.
Yeah. This is sort of a side tangent too, but this is my show. This is what I do. I side tangent all day.
What we do?
One thing I've sort of come to understand, especially with like heroic fantasy, is that like you almost can't throw enough at the players. Like in a way, even if it's just minions, you're giving your players more opportunities to interact with things within a scene. Whether that means they just have more goblins to fireball, or whether it's like the zombie scene where they're getting surrounded. It creates interesting interaction. So, if I have a piece of advice with combat to throw out there, it's don't be afraid to shake it up, even if it means you end up causing a scene where the players might have to retreat or change their tactics. That's a good thing, That's them
100%.
interacting with what's happening in the scene. So
Yeah, you want them to feel like a badass, right?
yeah,
There's another way. I'm trying to think of like pithy advice here that I can give people. So when it comes to things like spellcasters in big heroic fantasy games, that they can do things like fireball. Fireballing shouldn't feel like, boy, that fight was easier because we have fireball. It should be, we only survived because we had
Yeah.
fireball. The way you turn it on. So like if you want to tax a wizard's resources, make them feel like they had to pull out the big guns. Like, don't add just 5 goblins. Like, oh, it's more convenient if we fireball them. Have 30 goblins, right? Like, have the horde coming, and the wizard's like, oh boy, I fireball them like immediately, right? And they get to feel so powerful. But now it's, we saved the day because there's fireball. Not, this fight was faster because I had fireball. Like, it's more convenient. Um, Players should feel like their choices were the reason they won,
yeah.
right? Or
Yeah,
the reason they survived.
And also, if you put players in the position where they have to think creatively and use their abilities and spells and things creatively, you will never see a more proud player moment than when they had to use that portal spell to lock a door to keep the goblin horde from overrunning the party. Like,
Good.
you'll never have a more proud player moment.
Yeah,
So
let it work too. Like, let the plans work.
yeah,
You know,
that's the other end of it. Yeah,
yeah, they'll feel it's what a cool moment for them, right? On the non-magic side, put some big bruiser, low AC sack of HP for that great weapon master barbarian to just clobber, and like they're just beating the crap out of each other or something, right? Like, let them do that, and the amount of damage that it's doing would like flatten the wizard, right?
yeah,
So they can feel like, wow, I stood against this monster, and like that feels good, right? Or the paladin smiting that demon and killing them in 2 turns, like, feels good, right?
yeah.
That's what heroic. I think that's at the heart of heroic fantasy.
We're almost even sliding into the improv part of like the sort of
Yeah,
yes and no but kind of situations that you hear just regurgitated so much online, but
yeah,
like there's some truth in there, like to what you're saying, because like you know you put a 1,000 armed golem in front of a barbarian with a battle axe, and you just start yes anding as says he wants to hack off limbs. Like,
yeah, yeah.
that's going to
Go
be
nuts
the
with it.
craziest scene, of that campaign, maybe, where everyone just remembers when the barbarian stood toe to toe with this monster and completely destroyed it. So,
Yeah,
there's
let that damage resistance like work, like, because a lot of monsters damage is multiple types or something. Like, if you see a stat block that's like they do physical and necrotic. Just fold the necrotic into the physical for the barbarian. Like give them that moment.
Yeah.
Because I played a high level barbarian, and it's really like you feel like you're made of paper otherwise. And so, let them have those moments. That's what heroic fantasy is like. Have two hallways, with just goblins coming down, and let the wizard like blow like wall of force one and fireball the other or something like that'll be a cool moment, and it taxes their resources heavily, which is something that a lot of people talk about. Not being
Also,
able to drain resources, right?
also, what are your players going to remember a year from now? Are they going to remember that you were like, actually, that's regular fire and not magic fire
Yeah.
after you drank the magic resistance potion? Or are they going to remember when you ran in there with a flaming sword and just started cleaving through goblins, as
Yeah,
everything burned in the room?
exactly. Yeah, give them those big moments. And that is an aspect of improvisation, right? Like you're saying, it's that yes and with combat design for heroic fantasy specifically is its own beast. I find it sometimes a little harder than doing horror, actually. Like I find horror much more natural because heroic fantasy is they're challenged, but they'll win, right?
Yeah.
Like they're gonna win because it's the hero's story. And that's almost a finer line for me personally than what I normally run, which is like count your lucky stars, you have all your limbs kind of combat, right? Like that's more of like a natural fit for me. So like I don't know what to do when people have 120 hit points each, and I'm like, oh boy, I'm at a loss here, right? That's challenging for me.
Actually, I was playing Baldur's Gate recently, and
Mm,
I had this moment where I was in a fight, and I thought like, "Oh, this is how you do it." Like, and I'll unpack that statement because I basically like pulled the entire Goblin town on accident, and I was like,
nice.
just fighting a ridiculous number of goblins,
Yeah.
completely overwhelmed. Um, I had potions that I was just popping left and right because I was barely staying alive, and I had to like
Yeah.
flee through a side door kind of thing, and I thought like, "Oh, this is 5e, like I've never
Yeah.
played."
Okay. At its best. Yeah.
Yeah, and I sat there and I thought like, oh, this is what it should feel like. I should feel in a way overwhelmed all the time so that I have to, like you're saying, shoot off all my fireballs and use all my best moves and go supernova to survive.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb came on. I thought like, man, the next time I run a heroic game, I'm just gonna throw everything at them, but give them a lot of supplies to counteract it too. Like,
Yeah. They need to have decisions they can make during that fight,
yeah,
right? Because for a lot of character classes in 5e or 5.5, they don't actually have a lot of tools. They don't have tool variety. They like just deal damage, right? A lot of characters just deal damage. So you have to build an environment in which there are interactables like a choke point they can fall back to and a door, a big brazier that's on fire, right? That they can drop and it creates a hazard. Like you gotta build a space that isn't just a box. Yeah, like the goblin camp has all sorts of high ground and low ground and choke points and I assume that's like Act One, early part of
yeah,
Goblin
yeah,
Camp.
yeah.
Yeah, not spoilers. Like there's a Goblin Camp. You get to it right away.
Well, and just to piggyback off what you're saying, like this is gonna sound dumb when I say it out loud, but like in a way, the game is really like yes anding everything you can think to
Yeah.
do, including like
Hmm.
stuff like you know, pushing a goblin off a ledge into an endless abyss, and he's just out of there. He's
Toast.
out of
Yeah.
that fight. Using high ground to like knock stuff over on your enemies, or just throw all of the little gravity well bombs that you have so that
Yeah.
they all
Yeah.
get sucked together and stuff like that.
Right. Baldur's Gate. We're talking about Baldur's Gate 3, of
Yeah, yeah,
course,
yeah.
for those that are confused. It gives you a lot of junk that's useful. Like you don't need it most of the time, but you're like, oh, I sure am glad I had all these alchemist fires or whatever. Like I didn't sell them because boy, when you need them. And they ended up adopting this into 5.5. Like bonus action potion drinking makes that possible,
Yeah.
right? You have potions and you can still fight while using your main action, right? That's what keeps it fun. So boy, action potion drinking is the worst in D&D.
And this what you just said about like a bunch of seemingly useless items is something I try to emulate whenever I game master. Actually, I give out tons of weird items. Maybe
Yeah.
they have like one little thing that they do, and I hope that at some point the players get put in a situation where they're like, "Hey, that weird hat I have that inflates and lets me levitate? You know what? I'm going to put it over this
Perfect.
bad guy's head and then make it levitate and
Yep.
push him across the room," which actually
I
happened in one
love
of our
that stuff.
caves. So that's
That's
a real
beautiful.
example.
Yeah, like don't give out +1 weapons, give out alchemy jugs,
Yeah,
right? Alchemy jug is probably my favorite magic item in all of D&D because and I only ever use it to make one thing, mayonnaise.
I think you told me this story.
Yeah, yeah, like we dumped it on a Sararak. Yeah, because dumping a like a sticky liquid on somebody who's invisible lets you know where they are.
Right? Yeah.
So Alchemy Jug asks a funny question like, "What are you going to use this for?"
Right.
Right? It's weird. But yeah, like you said, like a hat that inflates, right? When you put it on somebody and floats them, that's awesome. Uh, more magic items like that. You don't have to have an end result, a niche or a build it's trying to create. It's just strange, right? And those are the best. Those are the best items.
In fact, this reminds me of like just a really short example story. But in one of my first ever fifth edition campaigns, I read I think it's Robe of Many Items, and I
Mm-hmm.
immediately was like, I know just the player who's gonna love this thing, and I gave him the Robe of Many Items with an added ability that he could add patches to it of mundane
Oh
items.
heck
If
yeah.
you're listening, you don't know what it is. Basically, it's a robe with like ladders and portable holes and stuff like that. And so I had it where he could sew patches on and just like pull weird items out of nowhere all of a sudden. And
I love it.
man, did he use that to some strange effect, and it was a ton of fun. Never
Yeah,
regretted
that's
giving
great
that
for
away.
that.
But yeah,
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so more, that's another big tip. You want to make magic items fun, get the weird stuff in there. Or cursed items like the Shield of Missile Attraction. One of my other favorites.
I don't
I
know that.
purposely equipped that as the party's paladin tank in Tomb of Annihilation because there's a bunch of squishies, and I'm like, yeah, hit me with all the arrows, right? I can protect people now. It changes the play style, changed our approach to combat. When I get a +1 longsword, does nothing changes. I just do a little bit more damage, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's neat, I guess, but make the +1 longsword like I don't know, Link's sword, where if I'm at full health, it does something cool. I can shoot a laser out of it, right? Like that's immediately more entertaining,
Yeah.
even if it is just a damage ability. Yeah, yeah, that stuff's fun. I need to get better at that, coming up with weird magic items to give out. I'm not as good at that, I think.
Just get Knave 2E and like roll on a couple
Mm.
of tables that they don't even have to be about the same thing. And by the end of rolling, you'll be like, what is a healing dagger with like a mold crown? I don't know.
That's great.
But
Yeah, roll tables are something speaking of dump stats, I only within the last like 2 years really started getting into roll tables, and I feel like I'm still underutilizing them just because they weren't part of what I used to do. So yeah, they're a
well,
lot of fun.
speaking of dump stats, my probably greatest dump stat is pacing, which is another one we were going to get to today, but we're already running pretty long, and I don't
Yeah,
want to
we're
take up too much of your time.
yeah, yeah, it's dinner time for me. So
So maybe we'll talk about pacing on another episode, and we will wrap this one up here with some of your DM dump stats. There's probably plenty of other ones we're not talking about, we're missing, but I just thought this would be a fun topic to get started on because, you know, I think our blind spots are just that. We're not aware of what
yeah,
we're not good at, so it's good to like have these discussions and really like stop and think like what could I be doing slightly better, or like what do I need to like be aware of to work on, that sort of thing.
yeah. And if you listening right now, tell us what your DM dump stat is in the comments, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
then maybe we'll do a part two, and we'll get more into like pacing and story beats and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah. I'm down.
Well, cool. Thank you for being here, Peter. that's going to be it for today's episode. Do all the YouTube or podcast things wherever you're listening. Leave a review, stuff like that. And thanks again for being my semi-regular co-host at this point.
No, I love coming on. I will always come back. Once a month, you'll have me back here if we can keep the schedule going.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next time in the dungeon, no matter what choices you make.